A family in Kentucky was born with blue skin for 6 generations. And no, we're not talking about Avatar. A woman who had been buried for a month appeared in her mother's bedroom and told her exactly where her husband had broken her neck. The autopsy confirmed the precise spot, and the court had to act on it, as insane as it sounded. In this video, we are bringing you 30 mysteries of Appalachia, including a government bunker hidden under a luxury hotel for 34 years. Welcome back to History in Focus. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button so you don't miss more videos like this one. Now, let's get into it.
Number 1. On January 23rd, 1897, an 11-year-old boy named Andy Jones walked into the home of Elva Zona Heaster Shoes in Greenbrier County, West Virginia, and found her body on the floor. By the time Dr. George Knapp arrived, Zona had already been washed, dressed, and laid out. Her husband, Erasmus Stribling Trout Shoe, had done all of it himself, and he seized up every time Knapp tried to examine the neck. The doctor gave up on the exam and signed off on a fainting spell as cause of death. At the wake, Shoe fastened a high, stiff collar and a tight veil around his wife's neck, something nobody in that county did, and stood at the head of the coffin all night without letting anyone near her. The men who carried her out noticed the head rolled far too loose inside. Zona was buried the next day. About 4 weeks later, she appeared in her mother's bedroom, standing beside the bed to tell the rest of it. That's what Mary Jane Heaster testified to, under oath. It happened 4 nights in a row. Zona said Trout came home enraged that there was no meat for supper and broke her neck. On the second night, she said where, crushed at the first joint. Before she left, she turned her head a full 360 degrees so her mother could see. The staggering part is that the exhumation found the neck snapped in exactly that spot. At trial, the prosecutor never raised the ghost at all. It was the defense that brought it into the courtroom. To paint the mother as insane, it failed. The jury took 1 hour and 10 minutes, and the husband got life. Number 2. On the night of November 15th, 1966, 2 couples were driving a black 1957 Chevrolet through the TNT area, an abandoned World War II munitions plant outside Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Roger and Linda Scarberry were riding with Steve and Mary Mallet. Near the shut-down powerhouse, Steve saw it first. 2 red points throwing the headlights back, at the height of a grown man. They weren't reflectors. They held still, throwing back the light, and never blinked once. All 4 told police it was a figure around 7 feet tall with wings folded against its back. Roger swung the car around and floored it toward Route 62. He said in his statement that the thing opened its wings and kept pace with the car past 100 miles an hour. Coming out of the TNT area, the 4 saw the same figure again, standing on a rise in the ground. They drove straight to the sheriff's office that night. The sheriff took the report and sent a cruiser out to the TNT area. The local paper interviewed both couples the next morning. Over the following year, more than 100 similar reports came out of the area. Marcella Bennett said she watched a gray figure rise up off the ground behind her car and dropped her baby daughter in the shock of it. Residents also described men in badly fitted black suits, asking that nobody discuss the subject. None of it has a photograph or a recording. Only testimony, given by people who lived there and were known around town. Number 3. On December 15th, 1967, 10 days before Christmas, the Silver Bridge was packed with people heading home from work and from shopping. The bridge had linked Point Pleasant to Gallipolis, Ohio since 1928, and it was the first in the United States to hang from eye-bar chains instead of steel cable. At 5 in the afternoon, one of those eye-bars let go. The whole structure went with it, and it took less than a minute. The bar was a piece of steel roughly 2 inches thick and 12 inches wide. Witnesses compared the sound to a shotgun blast. 31 of the 37 vehicles on the span went into the freezing Ohio River. 46 people died, and 9 more were injured. 2 bodies were never recovered. The investigation traced it to a hairline crack in a single piece, Eye-bar 330, which could not be inspected without taking the entire bridge apart first. The preliminary report came out in October of 1968 and identified brittle fracture at that joint. There was no redundancy anywhere in the design. One element failing was enough to bring everything else down with it, and that is exactly what happened. Residents had been complaining for years that the bridge swayed whenever traffic stopped on it. A twin bridge at St. Mary's, same design and same age, was closed that same week and later torn down. Point Pleasant is the TNT area town 13 months earlier. The disaster produced the National Bridge Inspection Program, still in force today. Number 4. Around 1820, a French orphan named Martin Fugate settled near Troublesome Creek in eastern Kentucky and married Elizabeth Smith. Both of them carried the same extraordinarily rare recessive gene, and neither had any idea of the children they had. 4 were born with blue skin, not bluish, not purple from the cold, blue, and the hollow had no road, so the descendants married one another. Generation after generation, always inside the same handful of surnames. It went on for 6 generations. One of Martin's sons married his own aunt. In the 1960s, a University of Kentucky hematologist named Madison Cowain III heard there were blue people up in the mountains and went looking. He drew blood from 2 siblings, Patrick and Rachel Ritchie, who were ashamed of their own color after years of being mocked for it. The result came back hereditary methemoglobinemia, an enzyme failure. Their blood was stacking up a form of hemoglobin that doesn't deliver oxygen. Cowain gave them methylene blue, a dye. The skin on both of them went normal within minutes. In 1975, a baby was born at the university hospital, so dark that the staff assumed oxygen deprivation and called an ambulance. 2 days of testing with no answer. It was the grandmother who asked whether anybody there had ever heard of the blue Fugates of Troublesome Creek. The boy's name was Benjamin Stacy. His father said the great-grandmother, Luna, was remembered as the bluest woman anyone had ever seen. Number 5. Around 1 a.m. on December 25th, 1945, George Sodder woke to the sound of breaking glass in the family's house in Fayetteville, West Virginia. Smoke was already coming up from the basement. He and his wife Ginny got out with 4 of the 9 children who were inside. The other 5 stayed. Maurice was 14, Martha 12, Louis 10, Jenny Irene 8, and Betty 5. Not one of them was ever seen again. The 10th child, Joseph, was away serving in the army that night. George broke a window trying to get back in and tore a strip of skin off his arm. The fire department was all volunteer and barely equipped at the time. The house came down in under an hour. The next day, a search of the lot turned up no bones, not a tooth. The report blamed faulty wiring, but the Christmas lights stayed lit through the fire, which doesn't square with an electrical failure. George said he had gone over the wiring himself shortly before Christmas. The state issued all 5 death certificates on December 30th, 5 days later. George hired a private investigator out of Gauley Bridge, C.C. Tinsley, who turned up this: the insurance salesman who had threatened the family with fire over George's outspoken views against Mussolini was sitting on the coroner's jury that called it an accident. The billboard with the 5 children's faces stood on Route 16 until 1989. The reward the family offered was $5,000. Number 6. On September 25th, 1981, Thelma Pauline Melton left the spaghetti sauce made for supper, took a nap, and set out to walk the Deep Creek Trail in Great Smoky Mountains National Park. She was 58 and had known that stretch for close to 20 years. She went with 2 friends, Trula Gudger and Pauline Cannon. Her husband, Bob, 77, stayed at the trailer because he couldn't handle the walk anymore. It was 4 miles round trip, and Polly had done it dozens of times. Around 4 in the afternoon on the way back, Polly picked up her pace and pulled ahead. One of the friends called out that she wasn't going to race her. Polly turned, laughed, and kept walking. The 2 of them watched Polly go up a rise in the gravel trail and drop out of sight on the other side. When they got there, they expected to find her sitting on one of the public benches. Nobody was there. They went on to the campground. She wasn't there either. They asked other people on the trail before flagging down a ranger. The search pulled in 150 people and 9 dogs. The dogs circled the spot and never took a scent in any direction. Ranger Den Barnett said that if she were inside the park, the dogs would have found her. On October 2nd, the park shut it all down, suggesting Polly had left by car. Except her medication, her ID, her money, and her purse were all back at the campground. And that summer, she had been told not to drive. Bob had a stroke that same night. The trail reopened on September 29th. Number 7. At 7:15 in the evening on September 12, 1952, 3 boys were playing on the school grounds in Flatwoods, Braxton County, West Virginia. Edward and Fred May and their friend Tommy Heyer watched a bright object cross the sky and come down behind a hill on G. Bailey Fisher's farm. They ran to the May house to tell someone. Their mother, Kathleen, decided to walk up the hill and see what it was. It was nearly dark, and the hill was a few minutes on foot from the house. 7 of them went, counting the family dog and Eugene Lemon, a 17-year-old National Guardsman. Up top, there was a light pulsing red. Lemon swung his flashlight to the left, and the beam caught 2 bright points. What they described afterward was a figure over 10 feet tall, with a head shaped like a spade and something like a dark metal skirt. The thing hissed. The group ran back down. The figure would have been within a few yards of them, according to the accounts they gave right after. One of the boys wet himself. Kathleen went to Sheriff Robert Carr and to A. Lee Stewart of the Braxton Democrat. Stewart went back out with Lemon that night and reported a strong metallic, burnt smell still hanging in the air. The sheriff and Deputy Burnell Long searched separately and found no trace. The Air Force filed it as a meteor. There was never another sighting there. The case turned into a museum, a giant chair on the town square, and weekend tourists. Number 8. On June 14, 1969, Father's Day weekend, 4 boys cooked up a game at Spence Field, a high stretch of the Appalachian Trail in Great Smoky Mountains National Park. They were going to hide and jump out at the adults when they came past. To do it, they split up. Dennis Martin, 6 years old, went one way. The other 3 went the other. Minutes later, the 3 came back. He didn't. They had been within a few yards of one another when they separated. The boy was 6 days short of his 7th birthday. His father said he was quiet and wouldn't have called out for help. The family hiked 6 miles to the ranger station at Cades Cove and raised the alarm at 8:30 that night. It rained hard that night, which killed any chance of tracking by scent right at the start. The search started at 5 in the morning with 30 people, and within 2 weeks, hit 1,400 covering 56 square miles. Trained crews and men who had never set foot in the woods came in together. Firefighters came, Boy Scouts, college students, 2 Huey helicopters out of a base in Georgia, and 60 Green Berets. It got to the point where the park asked volunteers to stop showing up because the uncoordinated crowd was doing more harm than good. Superintendent Keith Nielsen wrote that everyone kept assuming the boy would turn up within the hour. It came to 13,000 man-hours. Nothing. Not a scrap of clothing, not a footprint, not a bone. The case is still open. Number 9. On the afternoon of December 9th, 1965, a fireball crossed the sky and was seen in 6 states and in Canada. Astronomers said it was a bolide entering the atmosphere. Except in Kecksburg, Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania, residents told it differently. That the object came down slowly, banked in the air, and landed in the woods. People in the area heard a sonic boom beforehand. Hot debris was reported falling in Michigan and Ohio, starting brush fires. The first people there described a half-buried metal object shaped like an acorn. Military personnel showed up fast, sealed off the area, and according to local accounts, hauled something away on a flatbed truck. The Air Force stuck with the meteor. 40 years on, NASA stated that it had examined fragments and concluded they came from a Soviet satellite. No resident of Kecksburg had been told anything at all in that entire span. Except the records of that examination, by NASA's own account, were lost in 1987. Journalist Leslie Keene filed a federal suit in 2003 to force the agency to go looking. The October 2007 settlement produced hundreds of new pages and payment of her legal fees. The court-monitored search ended in August of 2009 with nothing decisive. What was left was an empty drawer where the answer should have been. 13 pages located at the Justice Department were withheld in full. Number 10. In 1838, Abelard Tomlinson opened the Grave Creek Burial Mound at Moundsville, West Virginia, one of the largest Adena mounds in North America. Out of one of the chambers came a 2-inch sandstone tablet carrying 23 characters nobody has ever deciphered. The detail that ruins it: the characters were traced to a book published in 1752, and the original stone vanished. Squire and Davis were already suspicious in 1847 because no witness to the excavation had seen the piece come out of there. Number 11. On October 8th, 1976, about 40 students from Bearden High School in Knoxville boarded a bus without knowing where they were headed. It was a horticulture field trip, and the destination wasn't announced until they were on the road. Trenny Lynn Gibson, 16, had left her purse and her books in her mother's car and didn't even bring a jacket despite the weather. The group hiked from Kuohai to Andrews Bald, 3.5 miles round trip. It was a Friday, socked in up in the mountains. The students spread out into small groups. On the way back, her group stopped to rest and Trenny went on ahead in a hurry to reach the bus. According to park records, she was last seen around 10 minutes to 3, half a mile from the parking lot. By 3:30, with everyone else already loading up, she hadn't turned up. Students and teachers combed the immediate area and found nothing. The bus waited as long as it could. Then it left with an empty seat, and the whole school knowing. Someone reported sneaker prints her size on the Appalachian Trail, heading toward the Double Spring Gap shelter. The trail went cold about half a mile past the junction. The dogs followed a scent that ran near the Kuohai Road and died at Collins Gap, which points to a vehicle. More than 700 people searched, out to 15 miles in every direction. She vanished half a mile from the bus. The governor's office went as far as offering a reward for information on the case. Number 12. On the night of June 16, 1964, Robert Cockrell, a 20-year-old reporter at the Grafton Sentinel, got off work at 11 and was driving down Riverside Drive, along the Tygart River in Taylor County, West Virginia. Coming around a bend, his headlights caught what he described 2 days later in his own paper. A white obstruction, 7 to 9 feet tall, skin like a seal's, and no visible head. He hit the gas. Police investigated and found nothing. Number 13. On March 15, 2012, Derek Lueking, 24, didn't show up for work and wasn't answering his phone. His family drove all night from Virginia to Tennessee. On his computer, they found a search about Great Smoky Mountains National Park and a hotel reservation. In his room at the Microtel in Cherokee, North Carolina, there was a Bible on the bed and a bottle knocked over on the floor. He had booked the room himself without telling anyone. The hotel camera recorded Derek leaving on March 17th with a small day pack. That was the last image of him. His car turned up in the Newfound Gap parking lot. Inside were a tent, a sleeping bag, food, rope, a cutting tool, and flashlights, all bought a few days earlier. His wallet and his cash were left there too. And there was a note asking that nobody try to follow him. It was short, and it was everything he left by way of explanation. The Luekings set up at the overlook with a van covered in flyers and spent their nights watching the ridgeline for the glow of a campfire that never came. They had as many as 60 people out searching. With no trail and no lead, the park scaled the operation back within a week. Derek is still listed on NamUs. Nobody has explained why he bought all that gear and left it in the car, or why a man walks into the woods with an empty pack, carrying only what fits on his back. Number 14. While the search for Lueking was underway, a second man vanished inside the same park. Michael Giovanni Cocchini, 23, lived in Nashville and was staying temporarily in Gatlinburg. He was last seen by friends at the Sevierville Walmart at 2 in the afternoon on Sunday, March 18th, 2012, one day after the last image of Derek. According to the park, the two men did not know each other. Cocchini had moved to the area only weeks before, and few people there knew him. On Tuesday, rangers noticed a car that had been sitting since Sunday at a footbridge off Newfound Gap Road, 1 mile south of the Sugarlands Visitor Center. That footbridge doesn't connect to any trail. It's a short path into the brush that dead ends at the west prong of the Little Pigeon River. There was no reason to leave a car there, and Cocchini wasn't a hiker and had no backcountry experience. Nobody could say what he was doing at that spot in the park. At one point, 60 people were searching for both men at once without a single lead. On August 21st, 2012, searchers found belongings matching Cocchini's and nearby human remains, including skull fragments. The identification came back on September 6th. The park gave up a body that summer, and it wasn't the one the press was looking for. Of Derek Lueking, not so much as a scrap of fabric ever surfaced. 2 men vanished in the same place a day apart with no connection between them. Number 15. In Jackson County, North Carolina, near Cullowhee, there's a soapstone boulder covered in more than 1,500 markings. Quarrying started 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, and the petroglyphs were added over time, between roughly 200 and 1400 AD. The designs don't form a written language, and nobody knows what they say. Among the markings are 2 handprints with 7 fingers each. The rock was part of a larger group that was destroyed. Number 16. Around 1775, Mitchell Clay moved his family onto 800 acres of good bottomland in what is now Mercer County, West Virginia. They were the first white settlers in the area. One day in August of 1783, with Mitchell away from the house, a Shawnee party attacked the property. 2 of his children died there, Bartley and Tabitha. A third, Ezekiel, was taken alive. Mitchell went after them. He tracked the party to a village in Ohio. With help from other settlers, he got there too late. Ezekiel had been burned at the stake in Chillicothe, Ohio. 150 years later, in 1926, a businessman named Conley Trigg Snitto bought that same ground and built an amusement park for the county's coal mining families. Ferris wheel, swing ride, swimming pool, dance hall, and cabins. Nobody told him what was buried under it. Beneath that ground were hundreds of Native American graves. During Snitto's years, there were 2 drownings in the pool and the death of a girl on the swing ride, struck by a delivery truck that backed into the path of the ride. The park closed in 1966. In the 1980s, when the land was going to be subdivided, the excavation surfaced and the owner backed out. Archaeologists recovered more than 25,000 artifacts. The Ferris wheel is still standing there, rusting on top of it. The park opens a few days a year, around Halloween, for guided tours. Number 17. Cherokee tradition speaks of a people already living in the region when they arrived. Short, very pale, with blue eyes so sensitive to light that they could only see at night. They called them the Moon-Eyed People. In 1840, a settler named Felix Axley was clearing his land near Murphy, North Carolina, when he dug up a soapstone carving nearly 3 feet tall. 2 figures joined together, flattened faces, and eyes too large for the size of the head. Number 18. In 1958, the Greenbrier Hotel in White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia, announced construction of a new wing. That's what the public was told. Buried underneath that wing was a concrete fallout shelter of more than 112,000 square feet, codenamed Project Greek Island. Its purpose was to hold the entire United States Congress in the event of nuclear war. The work took 4 years, and nobody on the outside suspected a thing. It was finished in 1962, the year of the Cuban Missile Crisis. A 25-ton blast door, more than 1,000 bunks, a cafeteria for 400, separate chambers for the Senate and the House, water tanks, and a trash incinerator that doubled as a crematorium. Every bed was assigned. Congressman Tip O'Neill said he lost interest once he learned his wife wouldn't be coming along. There was food, medicine, and air filtration stockpiled to keep 1,100 people going for 30 days. Maintenance was handled by a front company called Forsyth Associates, which officially serviced the hotel's televisions. Meanwhile, guests slept and played golf on top of the thing. On May 31st, 1992, reporter Ted Gupp published the story in the Washington Post, and the bunker was decommissioned shortly after. The whole town had kept that secret for 34 years. In 1995, the place became a tourist attraction, with guided tours and a ticket price. Number 19. In Burke County, North Carolina, lights appear over a low ridge inside the Pisgah National Forest. Published reports start around 1910, and the matter reached Congress. In 1913, at the request of Representative E.Y. Webb, the Geological Survey sent D.B. Sterrett out there, and he concluded they were locomotive headlights. In 1922, George Mansfield spent 2 weeks with an Alidade telescope and attributed 47% of the lights to cars and 33% to trains. Number 20. At 6:30 in the morning on January 2, 2006, an explosion shook the Sago mine in Upshur County, West Virginia. 13 miners were trapped about 2 miles in from the entrance. 1 died instantly. The other 12 hung a makeshift curtain to try to hold back the carbon monoxide, sat down behind it, and waited. Rescue would take 41 hours to reach that spot. The investigation pointed to methane ignition in an area that had been sealed off shortly before. On the night of the second day, the information relayed by rescuers reached the Sago Baptist Church Garbled, where the families had been waiting for 2 days. What they heard was that 12 of the 13 were alive. There was screaming, crying, and singing inside that church. People calling it the West Virginia miracle. The correction came a few hours later, the same night. It was the reverse. Someone had misheard it over the radio, and the news ran before anyone checked. 12 dead and 1 survivor. Randall McCloy Jr., 26, the youngest man on the crew, and nobody could explain why only him. He spent weeks in a coma with brain damage from carbon monoxide. In April of 2006, he wrote a letter to the families saying that at least 4 emergency air packs failed, and that his co-workers went out one by one while the room went quiet. The family's suits cited safety violations stacked up before the explosion. Number 21. The State Hospital at Weston, West Virginia, opened in October of 1864 on the Kirkbride plan. Light, fresh air, and no more than 250 patients. The main building runs nearly a quarter-mile end-to-end with 2.5 miles of corridor. It's one of the largest hand-cut stone structures in the country. In its last decades, patients labeled uncontrollable were locked in cages. The institution ran for 130 years, until May of 1994. In the early 1950s, the state cut a deal with neurologist Walter Freeman for what was called the Lobotomy Project, an attempt to empty the hospitals by operating on people in bulk. Freeman popularized the transorbital lobotomy, done with a thin instrument driven in at the corner of the eye and hammered through the orbital bone. He had no surgical training, and he liked to operate in front of an audience. The patient was knocked out with electroshock beforehand, not anesthesia. He charged $25 a procedure. In 1952, he operated on 228 people in 12 days, spread across 4 state hospitals, an average of 8 a day. Many of those patients consented to nothing. 4 died shortly after. By 1955, roughly 900 people in West Virginia had been through it. There is no official count of how many died inside Weston over its 130 years of operation. The research to arrive at that number is still being done today. Number 22. In 1930, Union Carbide began boring a 3-mile tunnel through Gauley Mountain near Gauley Bridge, West Virginia. The project would divert water from the New River to generate power for a metals plant at Alloy. Around 3,000 men went in there on 10-hour shifts. The rock was nearly pure sandstone, which means silica dust. Drilling started 18 days after approval. Nobody handed those men a mask or a respirator. The job was classified as construction, not mining, which exempted the contractor even from the minimum rules protecting miners. Robert Lambie, of the State Department of Mines, inspected in 1931, warned about the silica hazard and ordered respirators supplied. He later told Congress he had rescinded the orders verbally. More than 2,000 of the workers were black migrants from the South. They were men with no family in the area, hired as disposable labor. They would testify to Congress that they were driven into the tunnel at gunpoint. Silica destroys the lungs as acute silicosis, and young men were sick within months. Company doctors recorded the deaths as pneumonia or as something they called tunnelitis, then used those same certificates to prove nobody had died of silica. The company admitted 109, estimates run to 764. Many were buried in unmarked graves on land a farmer gave up. Number 23. On June 15, 2011, Scott Allen Lilly, 30, of South Bend, Indiana, set out to hike a stretch of the Appalachian Trail. He was a Civil War history buff and wanted to visit battlefields along the way. He took the trail name Stonewall after General Thomas Jackson. The last confirmed contact was July 31st at the shelter on the Priest in Virginia. From there to the next shelter is nearly 17 trail miles, a day's walk. On August 12th, a group of hikers was on the old hotel trail in Amherst County when they came across a body half buried in a shallow grave a few yards off the path, near the Cow Camp Gap shelter. Because it's federal land, the FBI took over on day one. Identification took 4 days. In January of 2012, the medical examiner ruled the death a homicide by asphyxiation. The body had been there about 12 days when it was found. Robbery was ruled out because only part of his belongings were missing. The joint team conducted 83 interviews across multiple states and in 2 other countries, including every long-distance hiker known to have been in the area at the time. They collected more than 100 pieces of evidence. The pack, the Ozark Trail shoes, and the rest of his gear never surfaced. Nobody has been arrested to this day. The FBI offered a $10,000 reward in April of 2012, and nothing came of it. Number 24. At 5:30 in the morning on November 20th, 1968, an explosion tore through the Consul No. 9 mine in Marion County, West Virginia. The blast was felt in Fairmont, almost 12 miles off. Miners who lived nearby heard it, knew immediately what it meant, and ran for the site. They found flame coming out of the mine mouth 150 feet high. There were 99 men underground. It was the start of a shift, and most of them were miles in from the entrance. Over the following hours, 21 got out. The other 78 stayed. The fire burned for more than a week. On November 29th, air samples taken through boreholes showed an atmosphere that could not sustain life. On the 30th, 10 days after the explosion, the mine was sealed with concrete, with all 78 inside. The decision had been put off because of the families waiting outside. It was 9 days between the blast and the order to close it up. Governor Archmore assured the public it had been a freak accident, a matter of chance. The mine was reopened a year later for recovery. The search went on until April of 1978, nearly 10 years, and 19 miners were never found. The cause of the explosion was never determined. It was the widows who carried the fight to Washington and forced through the Federal Mine Safety Act of 1969. Among the dead was John Ghost, 21, uncle of a future governor. Number 25. At 10 in the morning on December 6, 1907, St. Nicholas Day, the patron saint of children, the Fairmont Coal Company's number 6 and number 8 mines exploded at Monongah, same Marion County, 61 years before Farmington. The shock was felt 8 miles away, knocked people and horses to the ground, buckled pavement and threw streetcars off their rails. 4 men escaped on foot. 1 came out alive from inside. The rest were trapped miles deep with no ventilation. The official count came to 362 dead, the worst mining disaster in American history. But the board recording who had gone down that morning was destroyed in the blast, and miners who brought sons and nephews along as helpers didn't put those boys on the company roll. Historians put the real number near 500. The Fairmont Times printed 425 the very next day. The headline that morning said, in large type, that all hope was gone. Of the counted dead, 171 were Italian. There were also Russians, Greeks, and workers from the Austro-Hungarian Empire. It left 216 widows and 475 orphaned children, plus 31 born after their fathers were buried. In 2003, the Italian town of San Giovanni in Fiore, where many of them had come from, put up a memorial. In that decade alone, 3,660 American miners died in 133 disasters. Number 26. Between 11 in the morning and noon on March 3, 1876, Alan Crouch's wife was making soap in the yard of their farm at Olympian Springs, Bath County, Kentucky. The sky was clear, no cloud, no wind, no thunder. That's when pieces of red meat started falling around her. She said afterward that it was snowing meat, and that the pieces hit the ground with a dry slap. Her 10-year-old grandson was standing right there. The fall lasted a few minutes and covered an area 100 yards by 50. Somewhere between 50 and 100 pieces were left scattered, some the size of a snowflake, others about 4 square inches. Half a bushel of fresh meat caught on the fence, the roof, and the ground. Harrison Gill, who ran the local hotel, came out the next day and recorded that the material looked fresh. 2 men from the area decided to taste it. One said mutton. The other swore it was bear. The family cat ate some and was fine. Samples were preserved in alcohol and glycerin and sent to microscopists in Cincinnati and to professors at the University of Kentucky. A. Meade Edwards examined one and concluded it was lung tissue with cartilage, blood vessel, and muscle fiber. The explanation left standing was vultures vomiting in flight. A jar of it is still kept to this day. Number 27. In January of 1891, Octavia Smith Hatcher, 21, Married 2 years to the businessman James Hatcher, gave birth to a boy in Pikeville, Kentucky. They named the baby Jacob. He lived only days. Octavia took to her bed and never got up again. She spent months wasting away, slipped into a coma, and was pronounced dead on May 2nd. Nobody could say of what. It was too hot that made a wait. Embalming was still rare in that part of the country, so she was buried fast, beside her son's grave. That's when the town started falling ill. Other Pikeville residents dropped into a similar state, a deep coma that mimicked death. The difference is, those people woke up days later. They suspected an insect bite. James did the obvious math and got a court order to open his wife's grave. What happened when they opened the coffin is what Pikeville has been telling for over a century. The lining torn from the inside, fingernails worn to the quick, the face locked in a scream. There's no record of an exhumation, and the university archivist has never even located Octavia's obituary. What does exist is the statue he raised. James never remarried and was buried at her feet in 1939, with a string tied to his finger, running up to the surface, and a bell at the end of it. Number 28. On the morning of April 24th, 1856, Samuel Cox heard the dog barking in the brush behind the cabin at Spruce Hollow, Bedford County, Pennsylvania. He figured it had treed a squirrel, grabbed his rifle, and went out. Susanna assumed the boys had gone with him. It was only when her husband came back alone that they understood. George, 7, and Joseph, 5, had followed their father into the forest. By the second day, there were close to 1,000 people combing the mountain. The count reached 4,000 over the course of the search. Nobody found anything, and suspicion started turning toward the parents. They tore through the cabin and the ground around it. They even brought in a woman from Somerset County who claimed to have powers and sent her back after 2 days. A week went by. 10 days went by. No trace of the boys. That's when Jacob Debert, a farmer who lived about 13 miles off and hadn't taken part in the search, started dreaming. 3 identical nights. A dead deer, a child's shoe, a log fallen across the stream, a ravine, a birch tree. He told his brother-in-law, Harrison Wysong, who recognized the places. They went out on May 8th and found everything in the exact order of the dream. Both bodies were at the root of the birch. Number 29. In 1817, John Bell Sr. worked 320 acres along the Red River in what is now Adams, Tennessee. It started with knocking on the walls of the log house, then the sound of chains dragging where there were no chains, then something gnawing at the bedposts in the dark. Bell investigated every time and found nothing. As the months went on, the thing began to speak, and the whole house could hear it. The entity sang hymns, quoted scripture, and was heard in different rooms at the same time. It liked Lucy, the wife. It hated 2 people, John and his daughter Betsy, who was slapped, pinched, and dragged by the hair. Against John, the hostility was something else. He began having convulsions in his face, his jaw locking up until he couldn't speak or eat. The thing said it was going to kill him. On the morning of December 19th, 1820, John Jr. went for his father's medicine and found the cupboard nearly empty. In place of the 3 vials, there was one, a third full of a dark liquid nobody recognized. They gave a little to the house cat. The cat died. They threw the rest in the fireplace and the flame went up the chimney blue. John Bell died the next day. It's the only American case where a death certificate became a dispute about a spirit. Number 30. On May 19th, 1996, Julianne Williams, 24, and Laura Winans, 26, went into Shenandoah National Park in Virginia to camp with their golden retriever, Taj. The 2 had met 2 years earlier through an organization in Minnesota that ran women's expeditions. They pitched their tent near a stream, a quarter-mile off Skyline Drive. The water made noise. It was a quiet spot, chosen by them, away from the busier trails. Investigators would note later that the noise covered the sound of footsteps coming. The bodies were found on June 1st, bound and gagged at the campsite. Julie was supposed to start a new job that same day. In July of 1997, Darrell David Rice was arrested for attempting to abduct a woman cyclist inside the same park and became the main suspect. He served 10 years for that attempt. Prosecutors alleged he had said the 2 of them deserved to die. In 2002, he was indicted for capital murder. The charges were dropped in 2004 when the hair and DNA from the scene didn't match him. The case sat for nearly 2 decades. In 2021, an FBI team in Richmond re-examined everything and, in June of 2024, announced that the genetic material pointed to Walter Leo Jackson Sr. He had died in prison in March of 2018. Nobody ever went to trial, and Darrell Rice spent 22 years carrying an accusation that was never his.